Welcome back, guys, to another Ace for Waves episode with me, your host, Annabelle Schneider. And if you're wondering about the sunglasses, since I am indoors, it's because I'm trying out something new. I'm trying to look cool. So I hope it's working. It probably did not make me cool at all. But today's episode is not really a main episode. It is me. I guess I should give some background first, however. This whole week is going to be a series of videos put out every single day, and it's commemorating and celebrating the 1 year anniversary of this whole podcast thing. So, the days leading up to the actual anniversary date, I'm going to be putting out kind of like an assortment of videos celebrating the 1 year anniversary of the pod, doing some fun stuff here and there as well, because we made it a year. It's 365 days since I first started doing this whole podcast thing, talking about some of my favorite stuff, some things happening in the sports world, etc. So I thought, why not just make it a whole week worth of videos and content to put out, talking about stuff that I like, stuff that's happened throughout the last year or so, and just kind of talking about myself a little bit more. So we're done being cool now. You can see my eyes, and I apologize for the brightness if it seems very bright in here because I only have a lamp going on at the moment. And if I turn on the light back there, then my it's just gonna be even more blinded. So I'm still trying to figure out how to best work around that in my room. So apologies if my face in the whole lighting situation seems a little bit weird. But that aside, today is a coffee talks day. Ironically enough, I don't even have coffee with me right now because I'm filming this later than usual. I'm also filming this about like 3 weeks in advance. So some of this might be old news by the time I release it or whatnot. But I thought that for today's coffee talks, this coffee talks are just me talking about stuff that I find interesting, stuff that I kind of like, etc. It's not really centered around sports, but it could be. So today's theme of coffee talks is kind of a social, not really a social media app per se, but a website that I like to browse to find certain ideas, stuff that I kind of like to consume and keep up to date with, and that is Reddit. I use Reddit a lot to get recommendations, to see what people are saying about certain things. I remember the first time I ever used Reddit, it was for movie recommendations because one of my New Year's resolutions was to kind of watch more movies in the year of 2024. So I was looking to see what movies people were talking about, movies that people really loved in those genres, etc. And then I found out that there you can look up books on Reddit too. So I like to look through that to see what people are reading nowadays, see if I can find any book recommendations and book topics that I might want to explore in the near future. So that's what the whole theme centers around today. It is Annabelle's favorite subreddits. I have quite a few. I made a list. I'm just going to go through down that list, kind of tell you what I find interesting about each subreddit, what the subreddit talks about, and just kind of ramble on for however long I want to. So, the first subreddit that I like to kind of browse and explore is a subreddit called R Sports. And you can probably guess what that subreddit is all about. And you guessed it, sports. People post there just all types of sports, media coverage, sports scores, things happening within the sports world. So if you open up the subreddit, you might see like the final score of a basketball game. You might find big plays in the NFL. You might find women's tennis, men's tennis, soccer. You can find like any sport on that subreddit. So I do like to go on there and see what people are talking about, see what's happening in the sports world. The last time I pulled up the subreddit, People were talking about the AFC divisional round between the Ravens and the Bills. So I kind of saw some stuff on there. I saw people talking about the Eagles and Saquon Barkley and how he's just a great running back, which I do agree with. Saquon is a great running back, probably going to be one of the best in the league for years to come. I've seen people talk about the American Express, which is a golf tournament that Sepp Straka actually won the American Express by 2 strokes. So it was kind of a close, you can't say a close game in golf, but it was a close like score in terms of the rounds and the other players with their scores. I see people talk about college basketball rankings, their opinions on those. So you can find almost any sport on there. I'll browse that if I want some ideas for future episode ideas. I'll browse on there if there's stuff that I want to talk about on here or talk about like in a Saturday special or a bold prediction stuff that I do. So you you can find almost anything there, and I think it's pretty neutral. I wouldn't say that gets very crazy on that subreddit, but like I said, it's neutral. You can find almost anything related to sports, and there's always a sports community for you depending on what sport you specifically like. So that's one subreddit that I like to browse on. Another subreddit I like to browse on is a subreddit called R Short Scary Stories. I am big into criminal justice. I got my associate's degree in criminal justice specifically. So I like kind of crime and horror stuff to an extent. So on our scary short stories, there's people who write short stories, like actual short stories, but they make it scary. So like more haunting. I wouldn't say it's war or horror per se, but it's just scary. And that kind of reading about that kind of stuff doesn't scare me. I don't consider myself to be an easily scared person by those kind of things and reading about those things. There are there is stuff that scares me in real life, but scary short stories aren't one of them. And I also just love to read and write. So on that subreddit, I'll read what people are essentially writing and then if something, see if like an idea comes to my mind of a thing that I may want to talk about in the future or inspiration that I might try to draw off of. I don't I don't copy word for word from people's original content because number one, that is stealing and plagiarizing, which you can actually get in big trouble for. So I never do that. I just like to see kind of how people's minds work, how people think of writing these sort of things, and then put my imagination and my creativity to good use and kind of challenge myself with that stuff. Because even though I like to read about it, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a good writer when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I like to go on there, read other people's original works, and kind of analyze and try to interpret what their meaning is, because what they may intend for the message to be could be completely different from what an audience comes to the conclusion with. So I like that kind of stuff. I think it's very cool. And it's not for everyone. I get that. If you're not into like crime or you're not into scary short stories and stuff, that subreddit is probably not for you. But there's if you are into that kind of stuff, I highly recommend checking it out. I think you can find some very original and very creative pieces of work on there. Another subreddit that I'll go on is a subreddit called R Movies. That was the first subreddit that I ever came across on when I first joined Reddit. And it's a good Reddit for people who are not really heavily I shouldn't say influenced, but are not heavily kind I'm trying to think of the right word here, who are not heavily invested into pop culture. I don't consider myself heavily invested in pop culture. The only pop culture that I believe that I consume the most of is music and art to a certain degree, but movies and TV shows is completely out of my realm. And when I made a New Year's resolution last year to watch more movies, I really wanted to do that because I wanted to have conversations with people who do love to watch movies and love to talk about movies and be able to kind of have deep conversations and just meaningful conversations about the plot of a movie, the actors' performances in the movie, the art and the behind the scenes of movies, all that stuff. So I went I wanted to find movie recommendations and people recommended checking out Reddit stuff. And that's how I came across our movies. And let me tell you, people talk about movies on that subreddit. They'll talk about movies that they have loved. They'll talk about movies that they've hated. There are some critically acclaimed movies on there. I remember searching up the saddest movies of all time, and people literally said the saddest movies of all time, what they thought. So there's you're gonna get a wide you're gonna get a wide assortment of movie options and movie genres. So you can pick and choose what genres you like, what genres you want to stay away from. I remember being heavily reluctant to get into the sci-fi genre. That's a genre that has never piqued my interest, not just with movies, but with books as well. So I tried to watch a sci-fi movie for at first, didn't really like it. But I will say that my favorite movie that I watched in 2024 was a sci-fi movie. And it is a sci-fi movie that everyone has heard of at some point, which is The Matrix. The Matrix was so well done for a sci-fi movie. It had a good plot, it had good dialogue. I thought the actors' performances in there were brilliant. Keanu Reeves was brilliant, but most of all, it felt almost real to an extent because in the world that we are living in right now, AI is becoming more useful and more resourceful than ever. The Matrix took place, the original Matrix was released in 1999, and it's fascinating to see how in 25 years since it was released, how much of an evolution and how much growth that AI has made and impacting our lives right now. It almost feels like we're living in a artificial world. So when I watched that movie, it almost felt like certain parts of my life, I could visualize certain parts of my life with that movie. And like I said, I thought it was very well crafted for its time. I still think it's probably in my top 10 movies, my top 10 favorite movies that I've ever watched. And that is high praise coming from me. So there's a subreddit. Our movies, our books is another subreddit. Pretty self explanatory. I love to read books, and I'll read almost any sort of book. I have read a few sci fi books. There's this one book that I read called State Tectonics, which is not really sci fi, but it's more like of a democracy type esque book. However, I could see certain like sci-fi aspects within the whole plot of the story. So State Tectonics was a book that I really loved reading. I'm reading the Akatar series right now. I finished the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Really loved that. And then I got the next two books, which I'm reading at the moment. I also love to read Christian books. I've had a few Christian books recommended to me, and I really love the storytelling in those. Karen Kingsbury is a great author, so if anyone does love kind of Christian romancy books, Karen Kingsbury is an author that you should check out. Otherwise, if there's books that catch my interest and I read the description of what it's about, I'll just pick it up at bookstores or even through Reddit too. I know fantasy is a genre that I'm starting to get more interested in. I've read historical fiction books. I like reading books from a historical moment in time because I think it's important to be culturally educated from what happened in the 1600s and 1700s, 1800s, and even 1900s. Because I was born in the 2000s, I have no memory of what happened from the 1300s to the 1900s. So that whole time period is just zero. Um, I have zero knowledge of anything that had happened. And even though they kind of teach you that in history class, they skim through most events that have happened in certain time periods. They only talked about the important stuff and the meaningful stuff and what's most historic. So I like reading about those time periods and seeing what they don't teach you in school and what they don't teach you in your spare time. The 1700s has been a time period that I've been really interested and invested in lately. And so has the 1500s. The 1500s has really caught my interest as well, especially the Elizabethan era and the Shakespeare era of plays and um poetry. I like I love Shakespeare is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, our books, you can find book recommendations. You can search up specific books and see what people are talking about those books. So, and even if you're not a reader, I know some people who don't love to read necessarily, and reading's not for everyone. You shouldn't be forced to read. You should want to read in your spare time and read at your own pace. I truly believe that's a reason why people don't love to read in general, is because they're either forced to or they're forced to move at a pace that's not comfortable for them. Even reading like 2 pages a day, I know it's not a lot to most people, but to some people, reading 2 pages is a lot of work and a lot of effort. And we shouldn't scrutinize them for reading at slower paces or faster paces. You should read at the pace that you are comfortable with and read for your own enjoyment. Another subreddit, if you keep seeing me glance there, it's because I wrote down all my subreddits, so I made sure I didn't miss any. There's another subreddit I like to uh skim through occasionally, which is a subreddit called Our Hobbies. And it's just people talking about their favorite hobbies. I think the reason I like to look at that subreddit a lot is to see what people's hobbies are, see what people are doing for fun and for their own entertainment, because my hobbies are vastly different than other people's hobbies. Some people like to sew, some people like to cook, some people like to knit, do crafts, some people like to go outside and go for a walk or garden or do yoga. So there's a lot of hobbies in the world that people enjoy doing. I like to look at those things, see if there's a new hobby that I might want to pick up in the future. I know knitting is something that I would be interested in learning at some point. I probably won't learn how to knit now, seeing as I have other stuff that's more important than learning a new hobby. But it is something that I would love to try to do in the near future. Same with sewing. I could just visualize myself sitting down and learning how to sew a blanket or learning how to sew a pillow. I shouldn't say a pillow cushion, but like a pillow sheet, those sort of things. I could see myself doing that in the future. So to see other people talking about their process and their inspiration for crafting certain projects, it's really fascinating to me. Gardening is another hobby that I had back in high school. I think I've kind of shied away from gardening at the moment, but then again, it might be a hobby that I relearn or pick up again and try to do for fun. So, if anyone's looking for new hobbies or looking for hobby ideas, I highly recommend checking out that specific subreddit. You can find a lot of new hobbies and new ideas on there, and just see what people are saying about their hobbies as well, because someone might say something that sticks out to you and be the driving force to go out and do that new hobby. So there's that one. And then my final subreddit that I like to go on is one that's a little personal, but I think a lot of people could benefit and find use for the subreddit. And it's a subreddit called self-improvement. Now, this subreddit is all about improving either life skills, improving confidence, and improving just yourself in general. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is something wrong with you, but you can go on there for advice on how to handle certain topics, certain situations. You can go there to ask questions about life situations and receive advice from other people who might not be like a close friend or family member, but if you just need advice from random people on the internet, that is a good subreddit and a good place to go on. I've read subreddits on there that where people are talking about needing confidence to talk to strangers or need advice on overcoming anxiety in certain areas. It's stuff like that. So it's a really good subreddit to see how positive people will respond to other people genuinely needing advice, genuinely needing help. And I've even found myself taking some of those people's advices to other people, even though it wasn't originally me who needed the advice in the first place. But I've learned a few things about myself through that subreddit that I never really thought I would discover through the internet. But it's a really good, I liked positivity, and I like seeing how positive people can really be when they're trying to help out a stranger that they have no idea of, that they have no idea um existed, kind in a way, if that makes sense. So those are all of my favorite subreddits there. Thank you guys for tuning in to Coffee Talks with me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit about my favorite subreddits. And like I said, this is being filmed almost 2 to 3 weeks in advance. So by the time this episode actually airs and comes out on YouTube, my favorite subreddits probably could have changed. I highly doubt it because those are the ones that I primarily focus on. But if it's changed, then I don't know what to tell you about that. But don't be sure to stay tuned in tomorrow for a main episode. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but once you see the title, I think you'll be in for a real treat. So I'll see you then. And until then, have a great morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you're watching this. Bye, guys.